It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? Hello, today is March 3rd, and we are digging into the Canadian news. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to support the channel, you can like, subscribe, comment, share, do all of that nice things. It really does help me out. These are the headlines and hot takes for today. The BC Premier is astonished that a firm got Health Canada approval to make and sell cocaine. That's right. We are officially a country where there is somebody making and selling cocaine. So, Premier David Eby of British Columbia says he is astonished that Health Canada has granted a cannabis company the right to possess, produce, sell, and distribute cocaine. And honestly, this is pretty shocking. Eby told a news conference on Thursday about funding for overdose prevention and mental health that if Health Canada did in fact do this, the federal agency did so without engaging the BC government or notifying the province. So I guess this was news to him. It's not part of our provincial plan, he said. Health Canada has not responded to requests for comment. Hopefully they do. It is a bit weird that they haven't responded. It might just be a time thing. But they obviously knew about this if they've approved it, right? So they should have been ready for this. Decriminalization of up to 2.5 grams of drugs, including cocaine, began in BC on January 31st after the federal government approved the decriminalization exemption as one of several steps to combat the crisis. So if you want to know my opinion about this, I do believe in the legalization of all drugs. However, the real dirt is always in the details. So this is saying that Adastra, which is the company that has this license now, they've been allowed to interact with up to 250 grams of cocaine and import coca leaves in order to make and synthesize the substance. So Adastra CEO Michael Forbes, of course, this person's last name is Forbes. Like, honestly, if someone is like the CEO of a company and their last name is Forbes and they're trying to sell you cocaine legally, like, this is kind of like raising all of my red flags here. But he said it will evaluate how the commercialization of the substance fits in with its business model in an effort to position itself to support the demand for a safe supply of cocaine. And as someone pointed out in chat, I mean, like, this is potentially a good thing because it means that there is a safe supply. I just wonder, like, is this something that we want corporations and businesses to be profiting off, or maybe this is just like the normal way of how these things go down? Like, is the government going to produce cocaine, or simply be maybe the person, the body who is like selling it? Harm reduction is critically important and a mainstream topic. We are staying at the forefront of drug relations across the board, Forbes says. We proactively pursued the amendment to our dealer's license to include cocaine back in December 2022. Yeah, my Martin here in chat is saying it cuts out the cartel. That is true. And I mean, that's part of the legalization of all drugs. Because I think it's important. Why have a black market? People are going to do drugs. We know that. So to my knowledge, this is Kevin Hollett, the spokesperson for the BC Center on Substance Use. They say that, to my knowledge, prescribed safer supply in BC is focused on opioids. So I'm not clear how this might fit in, if it does at all. And here's the picture that, I don't know, for some reason it's not in the article, but it's a little picture of somebody holding cocaine. This doesn't seem like an official packaging at all, and the company is not the same as Adastra, which is maybe why they didn't include it in the article. But if you Google this article, this is the picture that will come up. So it does say cocaine. And it has the little tilde, little squiggly lines. So like more or less 100% cocaine. No cut, no buff. So, okay, interesting. In other business news, I suppose, Nordstrom is exiting Canada, planning to lay off 2,500 employees. This is I guess maybe not a surprise, because Canada's high-end retail market is oversaturated. So Nordstrom expects to take $300 million to $350 million charges as it closes down Canadian operations. Founded in 1901, the retailer has 350 North American outlets. Its major Canadian competitors include the 7-outlet Holt Renfrew chain, which is owned by the Weston family. Then they are the family who owns just about everything in Canada, including Loblaws and Shoppers Drug Mart, and they're always in the news now because the high cost of living and how we've been basically price gouged to buy necessities like food and pharmaceuticals. And their other competitor for Nordstrom is the Toronto-based Hudson's Bay Company, which also runs Saks Fifth Avenue. So as we know, like these corporations, they tend to conglomerate, and that's what we're seeing here in Canada. Nordstrom has been run out, and if you can remember, in 2015, discount retailer Target Corporation, Target, which had 133 stores and laid off 17,000 employees, took a $5.4 billion loss. That's in US dollars. So because they tried to break into the Canadian market, but they found it a lot more competitive and a lot harder to do that than I guess they initially thought. So they were moving into Hudson's Bay units and old Zellers, which had closed down. And as we have covered on this channel, Zellers is coming back to ride that nostalgia wave, and we'll be able to shop at Zellers within certain Hudson's Bay locations, which, you know, who really cares? But it will always be fun to say that the lowest price is the law in Canada. The chain's biggest landlord is Cadillac Fairview Corporation, the real estate arm of Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. So I guess I'm always surprised at what the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan is involved with. Like they were involved with the whole crypto exchange that crashed that I'm now forgetting the name of, and I guess they have money in Cadillac Fairview as well. We covered this yesterday, but I think it's important to highlight. It's really fun to, I think, track stories across multiple days as they develop. But this is the Alberta industrial leak from Imperial Oil. So they have obviously they've known about this for a while, and the reason that it's now making news is because they forgot coincidentally to tell the First Nations, the Athabasca. What is it? Athabasca Chippewayan First Nation. They forgot to tell those people, those human beings, that oil had leaked into the water table, and now they shouldn't be fishing or hunting game in that area anymore, which is a violation of their treaty rights. So people are pointing the finger here at Imperial Oil, who obviously is responsible, as well as the Alberta Energy Regulator, because they both were responsible for telling the Athabasca Chippewayan First Nation. Christine Van de Bijzenboos, what a name, associate professor of energy law at the University of Calgary, said there is a lack of coordination between the AER and enforcement at a federal level, despite overlapping authority. The result is a system full of holes that companies like Imperial can exploit to the detriment of First Nations and other people living in northern Alberta, she said in an interview. So, probably more like forgot. Yeah, or purposely did not inform because they didn't want to take responsibility. So, you know, the real thing here is that there's a lack of a functional relationship between provincial and federal watchdogs, which means problems can fall through the cracks. This is also being pointed out by environmental law professor Martin Olszynski. On top of that, these two experts believe that the Alberta Energy, what is it called? Alberta Energy Regulator has eroded its own reputation because of its lack of transparency. They've given every reason not to trust that they have their eye on the public interest, Mr. Olinsky said. The Athabasca Chippewayan First Nation chief, Alan Adam. You might remember Alan Adam, and it took me a moment because I Googled his name yesterday about this story. But he was the First Nation chief who was assaulted by several RCMP officers. You may remember a video and pictures of him looking very beat up. It's the same First Nation chief. He told media at a press conference Thursday that he believes it was environmental racism for the AER and Imperial Oil to keep his community in the dark about the toxic tailings seepage. And I mean, absolutely it is. This is just an ongoing problem that Canada faces because there's always this need to develop the natural resources industry, and who tends to pay that expense? It's the First Nations people of Canada, who do have their own rights and their treaties that need to be honored. But because we are a small community, small First Nations living up north, we're not considered to be ... human, I guess, he said. So, of course, Imperial Oil is sending one of their cronies to deal with this. Jamie Long, the vice president, is saying that they are taking the necessary steps to improve our communications so this does not happen again in the future. And I mean, this is like, it's like, oh, oop, sorry about the colonization. It won't happen again. And then, like, next week, of course, we're going to hear this new thing from Canada or some corporation that's like, oh, sorry about the ongoing genocide. It's not going to happen again. I swear. Just trust us this time. It's not going to happen again. So, just, PR happening here. Mr. Adams said that most of the Athabasca Chippewayan population hunt, fish, or collect plants from the land. The First Nation has started a contamination testing program for anything harvested since May. So, yeah, sorry, not sorry is essentially what they mean. That's right. Now this is interesting because I wanted to tie in this story as well. Ontario legislation targets faster approval of mining projects. So what's going on here in Alberta with this industrial leak is essentially a problem. Like the federal government, the provincial government, they're not working together with the corporations that are doing this mineral extraction or resource mining or resource extraction, whatever. And now Ontario is trying to, as they say, reduce the red tape. So it's all kind of like strikes me as part of the same problem. Ontario is proposing changes to its mining legislation that would speed up mining approvals as pressure mounts on the province to deliver on its ambitions to produce critical minerals for the nascent Canadian electric car industry. The federal government said late last year that it was working with the provinces and territories to reduce red tape in the sector after conceding that mine approvals take far too long. Developing a mine in Canada can take up to 25 years. Ontario Minister of Mines, who it's amazing that I never think of what ministers are out there, but we have a Minister of Mines and their name is George Pyrie. And so, of course, he has an opinion about it. The province said in its release that the new measures would not compromise environmental standards. And if there's anything we can trust about this government, it's that they care about the environment. They would not interfere with the government's constitutional duty to consult Indigenous communities or mining projects. So I love how they're like, don't worry, we're going to reduce the red tape, but we're also going to make sure that the environment is protected and First Nations are properly consulted. So I just want to check here. George Pyrie, I just assumed that he was a conservative, and yes, he is. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense to me. We do some crazy stuff with closure plans, Mr. Pyrie said. So, yeah, there is also this talk about the way that they close mines, and sometimes they say there's too much red tape around that process as well. I guess, I don't know. It sounds like maybe these checks and balances are in place for a reason. Before joining the provincial government last year, Mr. Pyrie spent decades in the mining industry, you don't say, including a stint as chief executive officer of Placer Dome Canada, which was one of the country's largest gold companies. Wow, it's almost like we have a revolving door of politicians and corporate lobbyists. Isn't that a coincidence? Developing the Ring of Fire critical minerals district in the province's far north is a top priority for Mr. Pyrie, but it is unclear if the measures announced Thursday will meaningfully advance the project, which has sat undeveloped since its discovery in 2006, in part because of the languid pace of regulatory approval in Canada. So the Ring of Fire is what they call this area in northern Ontario that is like super mineral rich, and they want to do like a whole bunch of mining and resource extraction from there, particularly I think to feed into the electric car lithium battery industry. So another voice here, just so we're getting a balanced take, is from Luca Giacovazzi, the CEO of Wailu Metals Party Limited, which owns the most promising assets in the Ring of Fire. So like we interviewed the person who has the most to gain from this red tape being cut. And of course, he is welcoming the provincial government's proposed changes. The major reason regulation moves faster in Australia than it does in Canada is that mining there is handled by the state government with no federal interference. So it's kind of just like, do you remember that story in Alberta that we just heard where there was no communication between the federal level and the province? Well, basically their solution here in Ontario is like, why don't we just cut out the federal government altogether? And we would only have to listen to Doug Ford, who clearly cares about the environment. Okay, so anyways, moving on. The CRA is doing a clawback of CERB, which was the benefit for individuals to get $2,000 a month during the pandemic for up to 4 months. A lot of people access this. 65%, the CRA is saying, went to ineligible recipients who must pay back their money. So that is a shockingly high amount. And unfortunately, this might mean that they're going to give us notice. Maybe if you access that, they might be giving you notice that they're going to need that $2,000 back. Of course, the Conservative MP Adam Chambers has said something along the lines that it's possible some people made an honest mistake, and there may be an argument for waiving debt in some cases. Oh, actually, that's a nice thing. Thank you, Mr. Conservative MP. But he said it's up to the government to provide data to make that case. And the NDP finance critic Daniel Blakey said he's been unable to get a clear answer as to how the government decides where it will target its auditing and debt collection efforts. He also said the government should consider a low-income amnesty for Canadians who will struggle to repay benefits. I definitely agree with this low-income amnesty. Like, imagine the government being like, hey, I know it's been hard times and the economy's tanking and you have all these new problems since the pandemic even first occurred, but you're going to have to give us that $8,000 that we gave you back. Like that could like potentially destroy a family. So it's just kind of like this crazy situation that the CRA has landed themselves in. The CRA Commissioner Bob Hamilton, who is the person who you see if you ever get a letter from the CRA, says, "Don't worry, the agency will work out a payment plan for individuals facing financial hardship. So don't worry, if they're clawing back that money, they're going to do so in a way that is it's going to not absolutely destroy your family, but they are still going to claw back that money." So it's pretty ridiculous. I don't know, some mixed feelings about this. I wish they were going after like the top 1%, the top 10% of earners in Canada, not working class people. Like, they've already given out the money. The money's gone. Like, you gave it out and it got spent. Okay, so lastly for today, in our ongoing update with the war on China and Justin Trudeau, CSIS investigating itself over who leaked information of China's election interference. So this is something we've been covering every day. The head of Canada's spy service says an investigation is underway for those who leaked highly classified information on Chinese election interference, and suggested the whistleblowers may have been frustrated by the federal government's handling of Beijing's intrusion into the democratic process. So of course, the irony here is that, like, hey, certain people who were not democratically elected, who are just intelligence agents of intelligence, are upset that potentially someone has interfered with the democratic process. So what are they doing as a result of that frustration? They're interfering with the democratic process by leaking this information in a way that nobody is accountable yet. Maybe they will find the source of this leak and hold somebody accountable, but as far as we can tell, this is basically just our problem, because now there's going to be all this mistrust for our elections process. It to me, this leak is something that is going to hurt Canadian democracy overall. So David Vigneault, the director of CSIS, declined to answer questions. And the thing is, like, they can't even answer any questions about this, because they're like sworn to secrecy, because they're intelligence officers. So it's very convenient that they can just leak some information and then be like, well, can you answer more questions about it? Well, actually, no, we can't. Like, because you shouldn't have even had the information in the first place, essentially. So there is an investigation underway by CSIS and our partners regarding the sources of the information, the leaks, he told MPs. That's David Vigneault, the current director of CSIS, noting that Canada is a democracy. The director added, there are ways for people to express their dissatisfaction. It's like, yes, there are ways for people to express their dissatisfaction. But that's not what CSIS is doing. They are hijacking the entire narrative here and basically creating all this mistrust in our election process. There are measures within CSIS for those who are dissatisfied with how information is handled to use a process to deal with that. But they didn't do that in this case because they've leaked the information. And just to catch you up, if you haven't been following the story here on My Homie Tutaro, this is something that also a report has found did not meet the threshold to constitute election interference in order to be released as knowledge to the public. So that's why we never heard about it until this leak, is because it didn't meet that threshold for us to be made aware. Now, if you think about it, propaganda, we're constantly bombarded by propaganda, whether it's from China or CSIS or the Toronto Star or the Globe and Mail. And that, of course, is going to influence the way that we exercise our democratic rights, our democratic freedoms to vote. So how do you trace this back? How do you say, hey, some Chinese people in British Columbia looked at a news article on WeChat and they voted a certain way? It's almost impossible to investigate something like that because yeah, we are human beings. We are only as good as the information we are receiving, and sometimes we are receiving bad news, not just from China, but also from Canadian outlets as well. So it's very strange to me, and I hope that if we are going to investigate this, we are going to investigate it across the board. Like, how is misinformation from China affecting our elections? How is misinformation from the US affecting our elections? How is misinformation in Canada affecting our elections? Because as we know, there's a large group of Canadians on the far right who love misinformation, and they are being pandered to by the mainstream Conservative Party. And they are basically merchants of disinformation, and all of that is perfectly fine and allowed to go on and even receive some government funding in certain cases. But of course, this is a problem because China bad. So anyways, here they're kind of just emphasizing that Chief Electoral Officer Stéphane Pirot has said that while it is not possible to draw a straight line between foreign influence and the outcome of a particular election, acts of foreign interference attack the fairness of the electoral process and must be addressed to protect our democracy. Liberal MP Greg Fergus used some of his committee time to raise the question of whether anonymous leaks to journalists about Chinese state interference could themselves represent a form of foreign interference. Yeah, so like that's the other thing. Is like, how do we know that this CSIS agent isn't compromised by China in order to leak this information to create all of this discontent among our elected officials, our democratically elected officials? And that's exactly what's happening. We're going to get more into to that today. We're going to see what Jagmeet Singh is saying. We're going to see what Pierre Poilievre is saying. If it's still before noon and you're watching this on YouTube, then you can always join us here on Twitch. If not, we will see you on Monday morning because we do this every weekday morning. We run through the top Canadian headlines. So thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And today's question is, oh, I had it in my mind, but I forgot it. What video game are you playing right now? Or if you're not playing a video game, please just tell us what video game you would like to play, even if it's an old school retro one. Okay? Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you on Monday. Peace.